And that, my friends, leads us into cliffs with a good amount of time left, 20 minutes. We might even get through cliffs in the one that follows. So with cliffs, we're going to have a new system: central interior, calcareous, cliff, and talus. Talus is basically the loose, rocky soil at the bottom of a cliff. As a cliff falls away, all that rock that jumbles down onto the slope below forms what is called a talus slope. All right, so here's a cliff. Oftentimes the cliff has an upper edge to it. And then down here, let's say maybe there's a river. So maybe there's a river here. This slope here oftentimes is a jumbled mass of rock fragments. And it's got very loose rocks at the surface, oftentimes kind of gravelly. And there may be trees rooted in this, something like that, such that you end up having an accumulation of rock debris down here, which forms what we call a talus slope. Almost all cliffs are going to have a talus slope below the cliff, excuse me. Now, there's a beautiful cliffs. This is the cliffs of the Kentucky River, called the Kentucky River Palisades. Little small perched woodlands and shrublands, even some little perched miniature glades and grasslands on these cliffs. Aspect matters on a cliff. If you're on south facing versus north facing, is it dry? Is it wet? All these things are, of course, matter. You could get ancient old growth trees over 1,000 years old on some of these cliff faces. Here's a cliff here in the background. Now we're going to talk about that ecosystem next. So focusing here instead on the cliff. Here's a good example of south facing, very dry, xeric, lots of junipers, some pine. This is a north facing cliff over here. Very wet, mesic, lots of seams coming out of it, even a waterfall. So aspect has a lot to do with the biodiversity of cliff faces. You need to be a rappeller and a climber to adequately study cliffs. Tennessee is blessed with some real unique cliff ecology. Out over on the Caney Fork River, east of Nashville, you get this cliff here that tends to have these grassy ledges on them. And oftentimes it has a barren glade or woodland at the top of it. And then, believe it or not, these have probably been here for so long, they've developed their own endemic species, including this giant, which can be 6, 7, 8 feet tall, called Harper's umbrella plant. And if you know where to look, if you're floating down the river, you can spot these big, tall spires of this plant, this leafy plant with the white flowers, about 50, sometimes 60 feet up on top of the cliff. That's what the basal leaves look like. Here it is, kind of popping up here. A lot of the photos you see on iNaturalist are blurry because people are taking them from somewhere down in the river below. Here it is, there sticking up. Little ledges. And there's all kinds of other little cool western disjuncts, a lot of species that are often more common in the Missouri Ozarks or Texas, like the western wallflower and gorgeous orange flowers. There's a whole, maybe half a dozen of really rare, mostly western species popping up on these cliffs. Endemic grasses like Svenson's wild rye, totally unique to this area. A totally undescribed species, still does not have a name, called the Cumberland rose vervain, one species I intend to eventually describe new to science, which is unique. And then recently discovered species. Sorry for the collection of photos. This is sort of a collage gone bad. This was discovered about 7 or 8 years ago, only known from a handful of populations around Edgar Evans State Park on the Caney Fork River bluffs. We have some really neat cliffs within state of Tennessee's public lands. Those new, as of about 5 years ago, newly designated Window Cliffs State Natural Area. So named because the open window here you can see through the rock formation. Really super cool, ancient old growth red cedar trees hanging off. but also some cool biodiversity, like that little grass clump right there. That's the Great Plains muley grass, disjunct from dry prairies out in the Dakotas and Colorado, Kansas. And here it is growing on these open cliffs. Some really neat ferns that are adapted to growing in the cracks. Various types we call cliff break ferns and spleen worts. There's the window cliffs there, really cool sight. I don't know if you can walk the back of that. I've not actually been there myself yet. This is what it looks like in the back. There's that little Great Plains muley grass there popping out in tufts. For a long time, this was the only site in the entire state for this grass. We recently have found it at 2 or 3 other cliffs. If you get on a north-facing slope or an east or west sometime, you find that the cliffs are really mossy and rich and moist. Huge diversity of mosses and liverworts. Lots of ferns like the bulblet ladder fern, sedges growing here, shrubs and vines hanging off, exquisite wildflowers. So these are really rich mesophytic cliffs that can often have really cool species, particularly of the bryophytes. Rich in ferns. Species like columbine, which Chase was talking to me about, common. Also on dry cliffs, it especially likes dry cliffs, actually, a little bit out of place. This huge plant with these big leaves called alum root is very common on our cliffs, particularly the moist ones and dry. And then the final cliff type, as I know I'm racing through this, are the seepage cliffs. This is Rock Island State Park on the Caney Fork River. Just beautiful seeping river cliffs here. All these are seeping wet. Everything you touch is very shaded and very wet to the touch. Luxuriant growth of ferns like the southern maidenhair fern hanging off. Luxuriant growths of liverworts and mosses covering rocks. Rare salamanders. Really cool micro communities that are really important to be aware of. And nothing better than just sticking your head into one of these little waterfalls on a super hot day.